Welcome to our first day on Buddhism. So Buddhism is in the same Indic world that we've been looking at, but it has some twists and turns. Buddhism approaches the world and the notion of the self very differently than we've seen with Hinduism and these proto-Hindu groups that we've been looking at so far. However, Buddhism, the big point is that they don't posit a self. There's no self. There is no soul. Some people often say that Buddhism is an atheist religion because there is no real creator God. That doesn't really work. There are tons of gods within Buddhism, but there isn't like a monotheistic God or a graceful God or a God that really takes care of us all the time. There's lots of little gods, and the Buddha himself often operates in many people's life as a God. So I would not argue that Buddhism is atheistic, because if you spend time with Buddhists themselves, they talk about all sorts of different gods, quite a bit. All right, so today what I want to start with is talking about the Buddha's life. So I'm going to go over some of the key issues and the key events in the Buddha's life. Here we go. And it's coming right up. Where is it? It's coming right up. Yeah, I know this is my favorite part of our adventures, is me getting the PowerPoint going. Very exciting. Here we go. All right, so here we have a lovely little picture of the Buddha meditating at night. I like this picture. It really kind of, it surprised me when I came across it. So the Buddha's life, or the Buddha Charita, the stories of the Buddha, is sort of a key aspect in every Buddhist life. The Buddha operates as sort of like an ideal character, an ideal man, if you will. He's thought to be, very physically imposing, and he had to be physically imposing and physically powerful and vigorous in order to do the meditative practices that he had to do to gain the Enlightenment. So he could become the Buddha, and Buddha comes from the root Bodh, or Bud, which means awakened, the awakened one. We'll see also with Jainism that Mahavir, the founder of Jainism, was also thought to be very physically powerful. And he had to be physically powerful in order to do these types of meditative practices that would gain results. So whereas in the West, we have an idea of people who are spiritually oriented as not being physical, in the East, these very spiritual people would also be physically powerful as well. So the Buddha's story is told in media. The Buddha's story is told in like informal things. When monks are talking to people, or when people are talking to one another, they'll often tell a story of the Buddha's life, or his many other lives that are collected in a group of texts called the Jataka tales, which are stories of the Buddha's prior incarnations. They'll use these stories as sort of didactic things to teach lessons, or they will reenact them in festivals, such as around the Buddha's birth, or his enlightenment, or his first teachings. This is one of the great stories in world literature. Most Westerners, when they encounter the story of the Buddha, it's from Hermann Hesse's novel Siddhartha, which is still taught quite a bit throughout the world and in public education. However, it's got a lot of problems when you read through it, and it doesn't actually line up with traditional Buddhist teachings as much, because Hermann Hesse had his own agenda, and that was to describe his own sort of humanist understandings of life and to describe an ideal that we can all aspire to. And the Buddha actually comes off way more Western than one would think when you look at sort of Hesse's book. So the Buddha's name was Buddha Shakyamuni. Yeah, that's the name he took once he was enlightened. His original name was Gautama, so he who is beneficent, or he who has a lot of cows, he who has the most cows. So Buddha Shakyamuni. Shakyamuni, Muni means sage or seer, that or even a monk. So sage of the Shakya clan. He was born to the clan Shakyas. He was born to a Kshatriya family of kings, rulers, landowners. He lived in the 15th century, or in the 5th century BCE. This historical Buddha did, and he lived in an area called Magadha. Magadha is the area where Jainism comes up. Magadha is the area where we start seeing early Vedanta. We see that in this region of Eastern India, that's where everything really gets going, as far as the inspirations for the later sort of prominent religions in India. We see that Bhakti gets started in the south of what would have been Magadha, but that's much later. Magadha has a lot going on in it. And one can actually just start digging around in the history of that place and the religions around there. And we see an incredible religious ferment. We see a lot of things coming together in interesting ways. So the Buddha was born, and his mother was actually aided by the trees. Well, what do I mean by that? It means that as she was about to be born, as the Buddha was about to be born, she had a vision of a white elephant. That's supposed to be very auspicious, that she saw a white elephant. And then as she was beginning to feel the birth pains, she reaches up and grabs this tree, and the tree instantly flowers. Now, we've thought about this more, a lot of us scholars have, and realizes that there's some connection here between tree spirits, which are called yakshas. We'll talk about them quite a bit when we talk about Buddhism. But it shows that there's this connection to the Buddha's mother, this female spirit that's associated with trees. It all kind of connects. A sage came from far away and looked at the young boy and said he would either become an emperor, a chakravartin, a turner of the great wheels, like a great emperor of a large kingdom, or he'd become a great sadhu. He displayed a bunch of auspicious marks, like he had one hair that kind of grew out of the middle of his head and his ears hung way long. And when he would like stand up, his arms would hang down to his knees. So we would think he's kind of weird looking, but for the people at the time, they looked and thought, aha, this is an auspicious child. He will come to much greatness in his life. Now, the Buddha was born in what is modern Lumbini. Here's a picture of one of the sites there. There's a large stupa or commemorative building right there. So this is Lumbini and what is in southern central Nepal. Now, the Buddha had an interesting problem. As I said, his mother died young, so his father raised him. And his father, realizing that he was going to either become this great emperor or this great religious leader, thought, I want him to be an emperor. So what he did was he created this palace where the Buddha would live, and he would never see old age, sickness, or death. And he was married, and the Buddha had a child, but at some point, he realized he needed to see more. So he gets on his chariot, and he gets his charioteer, and he heads out. He heads out into the world, and the charioteer explains to him when he looks and he sees someone that is aging. He says, "What is this? I've never seen someone who's aged before." And his charioteer says, "This will happen to all of us. We'll all age like this. It happens to us. It's happening to you right now." The Buddha's dumbfounded. So then he sees a sick person. He goes, "Oh, what is this? Why is this person's body not working? What is wrong?" And in some of these descriptions, it's described that he sees a leper. He sees someone in advanced leprosy. So he looks and says, "What is this? Is this possible? Can this happen to me?" And his charioteer says, "Yeah, it's absolutely going to happen to you. You're going to get sick." And then he sees someone dead. He sees a dead body, and he sees people burning the dead bodies. So from his chariot, he says, "What is this horrible thing? Will this happen to me?" And his charioteer says, "Oh, yeah." And suddenly, the Buddha becomes completely overwhelmed by a sense of the inevitable suffering that exists in the world. So right before things start to really kick off for him, he runs into a mendicant. He runs into a monk. Now, this wouldn't have been a Buddhist monk. These would have been these wandering guys who might have been into proto-Hinduism. They might have been reading like some Upanishads and thinking about Vedanta. They may have been Jains who were doing incredible penances in order to remove karma from their body. Jains have a notion that karma is like a sticky goo that gets all over your soul, and you have to scrape it off using rituals and meditation. So the Buddha steals away in the middle of the night, leaving his wife, leaving his son. Is the Buddha a deadbeat dad? Kinda. But he sort of has this attitude that it's like, I can stay and live with my wife and son, but they're going to die and suffer anyway. Suffering and death is inevitable for them. So if I can find a way out of suffering and out of death, if I can find the key to being free from pain and dissatisfaction, then I can give that to my son and to my wife, and they can be truly happy and won't be stuck living over and over again miserably forever. And then in the long run, after his enlightenment, his wife does become a nun, and his son comes and becomes one of his most prominent disciples. So they get it both ways. But I sort of like the idea of the Buddha as deadbeat dad. So when he wanders out away from the palace, he meets a whole bunch of people who are mendicants, who are living by alms. And he meets two groups of people. First, people that are doing meditation, jnana. Then he studies meditation with them. but he still feels that he's not getting the result he wants, which is to become free from pain. He can understand his mind better and see some clarity, but it doesn't work. You know, he's not getting liberated. He's still suffering. So he then meets a whole bunch of austere practitioners, or shramanas, or strivers. These would likely be early Jains, and they're doing things like hanging upside down, and they're like they're all hunched over. Some people like holding their arm, you know, up in the air the whole time. One person just staring into the sun. And he joins them and says, "You guys, you got it together. You must be making great results." And he's with them for many years. He gets to the point where he's only eating like 2 or 3 grains of rice a day. He gets so his eyes are sunken into his head. He can reach back and feel his spine and his belly because he's become so thin. But he realizes as well he's doing these extreme penances and he's still not finding freedom. He's not finding liberation. And at that point, a young girl comes by and he sees her and she offers him some rice and he takes it. And at that point, boom, all the other guys that are around are like, "Okay, we thought you were like the king of the sadhus, but no, we're all done with you, my friend. You are eating a big bowl of rice." And the Buddha's like, "You know what? You're doing this all wrong. We got to find a middle way. So you're going to eat, but not eat too much. You're going to be engaged in the world, but not too much. You have to do religious practices, but you can't be so extreme that you're destroying your body." So he posits the middle way. And Buddhists throughout time describe the path of Buddhism as that middle way between extremes. So a monk that I used to hang out with quite a bit, I remember us saying to him one time after meditation that we're going to go out dancing. He said, "Ajahn," Buddha is Thai word for teacher, "we're going to go out dancing for lots of unsatisfaction, for dukkha is the word. We'll talk about that more." And he says, no, dancing's fine. Just don't dance too much. He's like, "You can eat ice cream. Just don't eat too much. All these things are fine as long as you do them in balance and in moderation." So where the Buddha gains enlightenment is a place called Bodh Gaya, and here it is on the map. And here is the tree that he is enlightened under. This is in Gaya, or Bodh Gaya, India. So in his enlightenment, his body has come together. He's very comfortable. He's regular. He's in the world. He's good. And he sits his fingers to the ground and he says, "I will not rise from this spot until I have become completely liberated." And then he sets to doing a specific type of meditation. And my Ajahn always said that it was actually this type of meditation which one breathes in and breathes out and becomes completely focused on their breath and looks at where the breath starts and where the breath stops, and focus is right there. Some people say that this was the type of meditation that the Buddha was doing that caused him to lead to enlightenment. This monk again would also say, it's like, there's other things we do, you know, we can do visualizations on dead bodies and whatnot that help us understand impermanence, but they won't actually get you to liberation. And he would always teach us this one specific practice. So the Buddha is that, and then suddenly this character Mara, he's like the Prince of Darkness. He's this dark character, so a lord of death, and he comes forth and he says, "I gotta tempt this guy, because if he gets liberated, he's gonna tell other people, and then everybody's gonna get enlightened, and what am I gonna do with myself?" So the first thing he does, he sends his daughters, and they're like the most lascivious, hot, dancing, tempting girls in the world. And the Buddha's like, "Nope, I ain't having that. I'm doing my thing." And Mara then sends him a whole bunch of other temptations and whatnot. But the Buddha is resolved. He is not tempted. A lot of people argue that this is the equivalent of Christ in the wilderness being tempted by Satan the accuser, God's lawyer, you know, saying you can have all of these things and for all these kingdoms if you just, you know, do my thing instead of your thing. And Jesus is not swayed, just like the Buddha is not swayed. And then suddenly there's incredible thunderstorms and crazy stuff happen. And you hear all this like lightning and whatnot. And the Buddha awakens. He becomes omniscient. He can see anywhere. He can know everything. He has knowledge of all of his past lives and the knowledge of all of our lives. He has full realization. He has magical powers to do whatever the heck he wants. So he gets the Buddha gets a little nutty. Well, and he's sitting under a tree, this tree here. If you ask people, they'll say, "No, this is the tree." You're like, "Is that the seed from the tree?" "No, this is the tree." So still in mythological world, that's the tree. So the Buddha begins making his teachings, but he has to realize that he's going to teach. He thinks, I can just stay here and be liberated in my liberated space. And various Buddhist groups have different ideas for why he decided to teach. But the overall argument is that he felt compassion for the world and for other people's suffering. So he decided to teach Buddhism to the world. And he did that Buddhism at a place called Sarnath. It was also called the Deer Park. And in fact, at the place now, they have herds of deer. But when the Buddha was enlightened, all the animals of the world and all the gods came near him, and then he started teaching. And the idea was that he was not only teaching to people, but he was teaching to all the animals who could understand him, and he was teaching to the gods, because this realization that he's had is not something that the gods had. He got it. He got the full liberation. The gods who live in the Indian world, in the Indian culture, are not free. They are not liberated. They are thought to live extremely long periods of long lives with incredible luxury and pleasure, and then to suffer and die just like the rest of us. The Buddha argues that a rebirth in a human form is so important because that's the only spot where you can actually gain liberation. You can't become liberated as a god. So contemporary Sarnath is right here. They have a large stupa, you can see, and there's a lot of archaeological stuff. I've been there a bunch of times. It's a delightful little place. It's near Benares. But yeah, you can go there, and there's temples from like every tradition of Buddhism that you can imagine there. Lots of tourists. It's a very pleasant place. Okay, so the Buddha creates this, he sets up monasticism. So these people come to him and he says, okay, I'm going to call you a bhikshu if you're a dude and a bhikshuni if you're a girl. Bhikshu means like an eater, and the idea is they live by alms. So they wear one robe, they don't work except for the monastery, they don't touch money, they consume food that people give them, they swear off all of their property, which sometimes works and most of the time doesn't. But yeah, he creates this sort of community that he calls the Sangha. In fact, in Buddhism, they talk about the three jewels of Buddhism. The Buddha, or the example of the Buddha who revealed everything, the Dharma, which is the way of Buddhism, and the Sangha, the community of Buddhists. That's not only the lay community of people who are Buddhists, but also the community of Buddhist monks. And he lives for quite a long time. And in his 80s, he eats some bad food, or he possibly is poisoned. It's hard to say, but he sort of lays down and dies, and he passes on his teachings and his sort of mantle for running the monastery to his favorite disciple. And that's the story of the Buddha. So here we have a couple of Buddhists that are, this looks to me like Thailand, and look, there's a tourist there giving them sort of offerings into their begging bowls. And one of the interesting things about Buddhist begging is that, like, if a Brahmin is out begging, you have to give them vegetarian food. If a Jain is out begging, you have to give them very specific foods. But a Buddhist, whatever you get, they take. They don't even look into the hand. They take whatever. If it's meat, they don't care. They eat whatever is given to them. So you go, have a little snack.